Absolute suffocating darkness. That is how the world ends. Not with a bang, not with a glorious final stand against the forces of evil, but with a blown-out tactical flashlight. I pressed my back against the damp, jagged rock wall, my fingers digging blindly into the limestone. My chest heaved, pulling in air that felt too thick, too cold. Breathe, Wyatt. Just breathe. But my lungs refused to cooperate. My heart was a frantic war drum hammering against my Kevlar vest. The darkness was not just an absence of light to me, it was a physical weight, a living, breathing monster crawling up my throat to choke me. Nyctophobia, a fancy clinical word for a pathetic, crippling terror. I am the top undercover agent of the Purifiers North America's most elite dragon hunting organization. I have scars from taking down rogue wyverns in the Rockies and medals for clearing out basilisk nests in the sewers of Chicago. I am supposed to be the perfect weapon, yet strip away my light source and I am reduced to a trembling, hyperventilating mess. My mission was supposed to be a straightforward solo infiltration, descend into an uncharted cave system beneath the Grand Canyon, locate the last known demon dragon egg, and turn it into an omelet before it could hatch and bring about the apocalypse. Simple, until a freak subterranean magnetic surge fried my night vision goggles and my backup flares. Now I was stumbling through the abyss. My combat boots slipped on a patch of wet moss. I pitched forward, throwing my hands out to brace myself. My left palm scraped hard against a razor-sharp stalagmite, slicing right through my tactical glove. Damn it! I hissed through gritted teeth, clutching my bleeding hand. I fell to my knees right onto something smooth, warm, and unnaturally solid. Even in the pitch black, the sheer dark energy radiating from the object made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The egg. I had found it. I fumbled for the combat knife strapped to my thigh. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely unclip the sheath. As I hovered over the massive obsidian shell, a heavy drop of my blood fell from my lacerated palm and splattered directly onto its surface. There was a sound like meat hitting a hot grill. A sudden searing pain ripped through my chest as if a red-hot needle had been driven straight into my heart. I gasped, collapsing backward. Beneath my skin, something ancient and heavy snapped into place. It felt like an invisible burning thread had just been tied around my very soul, anchoring it to the thing in front of me. A faint golden glow began to bleed through the fractures of the egg. The shell splintered apart with the sound of breaking glass. The golden light pushed back the suffocating darkness just enough for me to see. I gripped my knife, forcing myself to stand bracing for the emergence of a world-ending beast. I expected scales of iron eyes of hellfire, a maw that could swallow a Humvee whole. Instead, a pile of black soot shifted among the broken shells. I blinked. Then I blinked again. Sitting in the center of the wreckage was a pitch-black, remarkably chubby flying lizard. It had tiny, useless-looking wings, a round belly, and a pair of overly large golden eyes that blinked up at me with profound confusion. It looked less like the legendary demon dragon of destruction and more like an overfed burnt chicken nugget. "You have got to be kidding me," I muttered, my voice cracking. This was the apocalypse. The lizard let out a high-pitched, pathetic squeak, shrinking back. I did not have time for this. Dragon or oversized gecko, my orders were clear. I raised my knife ready to bring it down. But the moment my muscles tensed with murderous intent, a phantom blade of agony slashed across my own chest. I staggered, gasping. What the hell? The life-sharing contract. My blood. Of course. In my panicked state, I had accidentally initiated a blood bond. If I killed this fat little mistake, I would die with it. Seeing the shiny blade, the lizard panicked. It scrambled backward, tripped over a piece of its own eggshell, and let out a terrified, involuntary hiccup. A small, perfectly spherical ball of flame shot out of its mouth. The flame did not dissipate. It floated mid-air, casting a warm, brilliant, and steady amber light across the cavern. Instantly, the crushing weight on my chest vanished. The darkness retreated, my erratic breathing slowed, and the cold sweat on my forehead began to dry. The light was incredibly warm, soothing every frayed nerve in my body. I stared at the little flame, then down at the chubby lizard, who was now looking at me defensively, its tiny tail wrapping around its round belly. I looked at my knife. I looked at the lizard. If I killed it, I would die. If I left it here, it would die, and then I would die. If I brought it to the purifiers, they would kill it, and once again, I would die. But most importantly, it made light. Real, unwavering light. "All right, you little freak," I whispered the sarcasm, returning to mask my vulnerability. "Congratulations. You just got yourself a promotion from apocalyptic threat to tactical nightlight. Before the confused creature could protest, I grabbed it by the scruff of its neck, ignoring its indignant squeals, and shoved it roughly into my tactical backpack. I zipped it shut. The Grand Canyon was a bust. I was heading back to my luxury apartment in New York, and I was bringing the apocalypse with me. Living with an apocalyptic threat in a luxury Manhattan penthouse is less epic battle of good and evil and more unhinged roommate situation. It had been exactly 3 weeks since the Grand Canyon incident. To the purifiers, I was a hero. I had submitted a highly fabricated, thoroughly convincing report stating that I had successfully located the demon dragon egg and smashed it to pieces, barely escaping the cavern's collapse. HQ gave me a commendation, a hefty bonus, and 2 weeks of mandatory shore leave to recover from my harrowing ordeal. They had no idea that the harrowing ordeal was currently sitting on my custom Italian leather sofa, aggressively chewing on a piece of premium A5 Wagyu beef. I leaned against the kitchen island, swirling a glass of bourbon, watching the creature. I had decided to call him Damon, mostly because it sounded vaguely demonic, but also because he absolutely hated it. Whenever I said his name, his overly large golden eyes would narrow into slits of pure, unadulterated loathing. Beneath that chubby soot-black exterior lay the soul of an ancient, prideful conqueror. I could see it in the way he carried himself. He did not just walk across the coffee table, he marched, attempting to exude an aura of terrifying majesty, which was entirely ruined by his round belly dragging against the glass surface. But daytime Damon was merely an annoyance. Nighttime Damon was my lifeline. When the sun dipped below the city skyline and the shadows stretched across my apartment, the familiar, suffocating dread would begin to claw at the edges of my mind. My nyctophobia was not just a fear of what lurked in the dark, it was the absolute terror of the dark itself. The crushing isolation, the sensory deprivation, the feeling of being buried alive. "All right, Damon. Clock and time," I announced, walking over and plucking him from the sofa by his armpits. He let out an indignant bird-like cry, kicking his stubby legs. I carried him into my bedroom, dumped him onto the center of my king-sized mattress, and turned off the overhead lights. Instantly, the darkness rushed in. My breath hitched. My chest tightened automatically. But before the panic could fully take root, I scooped the struggling lizard up, lay down, and pinned him flat against my chest. "Light it up, buddy," I muttered, my voice tight. Humiliated, infuriated, and entirely trapped beneath my forearms, Damon glared at me. For a moment, he refused. But the sheer proximity meant he could feel my erratic heartbeat, the cold sweat breaking out on my skin, the genuine, pathetic terror radiating from my core. With a resentful, muffled hiccup, a small, eternal amber flame flickered to life in his throat, glowing through his scales like a living lantern. The warm light spilled across the bed. My breathing stabilized. I let out a long, shaky exhale, burying my face into the top of his scaly head. Good boy. Damon despised this arrangement. As a legendary entity of destruction, being used as a tactical nightlight by a human was the ultimate insult. 2 nights ago, he had finally snapped. While I was falling asleep, he had twisted his head and sunk his blunt little teeth into my collarbone. It pinched. I hissed, my eyes snapping open. But the reaction from Damon was catastrophic. The moment his teeth broke my skin, the blood bond, the life-sharing contract we had accidentally forged in the cave, activated. I felt a sharp sting, but Damon let out a screech of pure, agonizing torment. He rolled off my chest, thrashing on the bed as if invisible blades were slicing him open. The contract was fiercely protective of the host. I felt a fraction of the pain he absorbed, the devastating multiplied backlash. I had to spend the next hour frantically petting him and feeding him expensive smoked salmon just to stop him from shivering. "Blood contract, you idiot," I had whispered, rubbing his belly as he lay completely defeated. "I feel a pinch, you feel a stab. Try to assassinate me again, and you will just end up executing yourself." Since that night, he had not bitten me, but the glares he shot me were lethal enough to melt steel. Things settled into a bizarre, dysfunctional routine until the blizzard hit. It was late January and a massive nor'easter slammed into New York City. The wind howled against my floor-to-ceiling windows like a chorus of screaming banshees. I was sitting in the living room trying to read a mission briefing when a loud cracking sound of thunder shook the entire building. Then the power grid failed. The entire city block went black. No streetlights, no ambient glow from neighboring skyscrapers. Just a dense, impenetrable void. My backup generator did not kick in. The system had frozen. The darkness did not just fall, it slammed into me like a physical blow. The report slipped from my hands. My throat closed up instantly. No, no, no. I stumbled backward, tripping over the coffee table, crashing hard onto the hardwood floor. I could not see my hands. I could not see the ceiling. The air was freezing, but I was burning up, gasping for oxygen that was not there. The walls were shrinking, closing in, crushing my ribs. Damon, I choked out a pathetic, ragged sound. I scrambled blindly, my hands scraping against the floorboards. Where was he? He could have run. He could have hidden. This was his chance to let me suffer, to watch his captor drown in his own pathetic fear. Without him, the blood bond would not kill me. My own mind would. I curled into a fetal position, pressing my hands over my ears, hyperventilating so hard, black spots danced behind my tightly shut eyes. I was the top agent of the purifiers. I was a killer. I was nothing. Then I felt a weight. Soft, warm claws pressed against my trembling shoulder. A small, sturdy body climbed up the side of my neck. I froze. Damon did not just burp a small flame this time. With a soft, rumbling purr that vibrated deep within his chest, the tip of his tail ignited. It was not a destructive fire. It was a concentrated, brilliant, soothing heat. He carefully wrapped his glowing tail around my neck like a heated, luminous scarf, pressing his chubby, warm belly directly against my wildly beating pulse. The amber light pushed the darkness back. The shadows retreated. I opened my eyes, tears blurring my vision. The chubby black lizard was perched on my collarbone, looking down at me. The hatred in his golden eyes was gone, replaced by a strange, quiet intensity. He nudged my cheek with his snout, a silent command to breathe. I reached up with trembling hands, gently cradling his warm, glowing body against my neck. I pulled my knees to my chest, closing my eyes as the storm raged outside. He was supposed to be a monster. But that night, as the city froze in the dark, the demon dragon was the only thing keeping me human. Being a top-tier field agent for the purifiers means living out of tactical duffel bags and cheap motel rooms. Traveling across the country to hunt rogue magical beasts is grueling work. It becomes exponentially more complicated when you are smuggling a world-ending entity in your breast pocket. Over the next 2 months, Damon and I became the most dysfunctional duo in North America. We traveled everywhere together. In the dense, rain-soaked pine forests of Oregon, he stayed tucked inside my insulated jacket, acting as a personal, violently temperamental radiator. In the blood-stained, rain-slicked alleyways of Chicago, he rode in my tactical pouch, peeking out just enough to glare at whatever low-level ghoul I was currently decapitating. He was getting heavier, too. At first, I thought my premium meat-only diet was making him fat. But then I noticed a disturbing trend. After a successful raid on a coven in Seattle, a highly volatile Class A magical core went missing from the evidence locker. A week later, a confiscated enchanted dagger in Detroit was drained of its dark energy, reduced to brittle, useless rust. I found Damon burping out a spark of purple necrotic fire that smelled faintly of the missing dagger. He was feeding, not just on Wagyu beef, but on the raw, concentrated magical energy of the Purifier's own armory. He was using my missions as an all-you-can-eat buffet to bypass his larval stage and regain his strength. I should have reported it. I should have turned him in. Instead, I started actively forging inventory reports to cover his tracks. Why? Because the enitophobia had not gone away. If anything, the unpredictable nature of my missions made the panic attacks sharper, more sudden. Without Damon's steady golden flame anchoring me in the dark hotel rooms of unfamiliar cities, I would have lost my mind. I was a hostage to my own fear, and he was the perfect, terrifying ransom. But somewhere along the line, the dynamic began to blur. The ancient, prideful conqueror was fighting a losing battle against his current biological form. The pet syndrome was taking over, and it was entirely humiliating for both of us. It culminated during a joint operation in Boston. I was working with the local branch to track a rogue warlock. They brought in a specialized K9 unit, a massive, genetically modified tracking hound that looked like a cross between a wolf and a nightmare. After a successful breach, the handler let the dog rest. I have always liked dogs. They do not judge, and they do not hold grudges. "Good boy, Brutus," I said, crouching down and vigorously scratching the massive hound behind his ears. The dog leaned into my touch, letting out a deep, contented rumble, thumping its tail against the asphalt. "You did good today. Who is the best boy?" Suddenly, my chest pocket began to vibrate furiously. Before I could register the warning signs, a familiar, chubby black head poked out of the zipper. Damon's golden eyes were wide dilated and blazing with absolute unhinged fury. He looked at the dog. He looked at my hand on the dog. He let out a sharp, involuntary hiccup. A concentrated bullet of amber flame shot out of his mouth, flying straight past my nose and singing the very tip of the hound ear. The massive dog yelped, jumping 3 feet in the air and scrambling behind its handler, whimpering. "What the hell was that?" the handler shouted, looking around frantically. Static, I lied smoothly, shoving Damon's head back down into my pocket and zipping it shut with alarming speed. "Got a bad taser battery. Sorry about that." I power walked away, my heart hammering. When we finally got back to our miserable, dim motel room, I pulled Damon out and set him on the bed. "Are you insane?" I hissed. "You almost blew our cover over a dog." Damon did not spit fire this time. He turned his back to me, sat heavily on his haunches, and wrapped his tail around his body, aggressively refusing to look at me. He was sulking. The legendary demon dragon of destruction was jealous. A strange, unfamiliar warmth bloomed in my chest. I sat on the edge of the mattress, sighing. "You are a menace, you know that." I reached out, running my fingers down his spine. He stiffened, trying to maintain his aura of offended majesty, but the moment my thumb hit the base of his neck, his resolve crumbled. He leaned back into my hand with a soft, involuntary purr. As I stroked the scales beneath his chin, my fingertip brushed against a single slightly raised scale hidden in the folds of his neck. It felt different, smoother, warmer, and humming with a faint pulsing energy. The reverse scale. The absolute most sensitive, fiercely protected part of a dragon anatomy. The moment I touched it, Damon gasped. It was not a squeak or a growl, but a sharp, breathless intake of air. His entire body shuddered violently. The golden glow in his throat flared, spreading rapidly beneath his dark scales, until his entire neck and chest flushed a deep, luminous, burning red. It was not the heat of anger. It was the overwhelming rush of total sensory overload. He did not pull away. He froze, completely paralyzed by the touch, his large golden eyes snapping up to meet mine. The hatred was gone. The arrogance was gone. In its place was a look of such startling vulnerability and desperate craving that I felt my own breath hitch. My hand stopped. I knew I should pull away. I knew this was crossing a line that had never been written in our accidental blood contract. He was a monster biding his time. I was his captor. But looking at his flushed, trembling form in the dim light of the motel room, the truth hit me with the force of a freight train. He was not just my tactical nightlight anymore, and I was not just his host. We were bound together, feeding off each other's weaknesses, and neither of us knew how to let go. I did not move my hand. Slowly, carefully, I stroked the scale one more time. Damon let out a muffled, embarrassed whine, burying his face into my palm. He was humiliated by his own dependence, but as the darkness pressed against the motel windows, he stayed exactly where he was. You can only forge so many inventory reports before an auditor with a functioning brain notices that an alarming amount of highly classified magical weaponry is vanishing into thin air. I should have seen the ambush coming. But when you are exhausted, paranoid, and constantly worrying about whether your pocket-sized apocalypse has indigestion from eating a cursed amulet, your reflexes dull. They did not just send a squad, they sent an entire extraction team. They cornered us during what was supposed to be a routine debriefing at the Blackwood Underground facility in Nevada, a subterranean fortress buried 2 miles beneath the desert, used specifically for containment and interrogation. Before I could even draw my weapon, 3 specialized mages hit me with a localized paralysis hex. I hit the steel floor hard. They stripped my gear, confiscated my weapons, but crucially, they did not find Damon. He was tucked deep inside the concealed, magically shielded inner pocket of my tactical vest, completely masking his dark energy signature. Agent Wyatt, the cold, synthesized voice of Director Vance, echoed through the intercom. "You have been harboring a Class Omega threat. Hand over the entity, and we might let you keep your memories before we court-martial you." I was sitting on the floor of a heavy containment cell. "I do not know what you are talking about, Vance." I spat, my voice laced with venom. "Did you lose your favorite paperweight or something? Have it your way." There was a heavy mechanical clunk. Every single light in the cell died, but it was not just a power outage. Vance had dropped me into the void chamber, a specialized interrogation room designed to absorb every single photon of light. It was an artificial, absolute crushing blackness. The air instantly grew frigid. My lungs seized. No. The NY Stiphobia did not walk in, it kicked the door down. The darkness pressed against my eyeballs, heavy and suffocating like wet concrete pouring down my throat. I scrambled backward until my spine hit the cold steel wall, my hands flying up to claw at my own chest. I was hyperventilating, the frantic, loud sound of my heart drowning out the hum of the facility. "We know it uses your body heat," Wyatt Vance's voice sneered from the void. "We will extinguish the light, and then we will extract the beast." A mechanical slit opened in the wall. I could not see it, but I heard the high-pitched whine of suppression turrets spooling up. They were firing wide-dispersion anti-magic rounds, shrapnel designed to pierce flesh and neutralize magical cores. They were going to shoot blindly until they hit whatever I was hiding. "Light it up, buddy!" I choked out a pathetic, ragged plea. I tapped my chest pocket frantically. "Damon, please! Just a spark!" But nothing happened. Damon was frozen. The absolute darkness combined with the oppressive anti-magic field of the room had temporarily suppressed his abilities. I felt him squirming frantically against my ribs, letting out a terrified, high-pitched squeak, but no fire came. The rapid sound of shots firing echoed through the air. I heard the rounds ricocheting off the steel walls in the dark. I did not think. I did not weigh the tactical advantage. I was an elite purifier trained to destroy monsters, but the moment I heard the shrapnel flying, my body acted entirely on instinct. I threw myself forward, curling into a tight defensive ball on the ground, wrapping both of my arms securely over my chest pocket, using my back as a human shield. "Stay down," I wheezed to the trembling lump in my vest. A sharp, searing pain ripped through my left shoulder. A suppression round grazed my flesh, tearing through my tactical shirt. Hot blood welled up, spilling down my arm. I bit back a scream, my muscles convulsing. Inside my pocket, the movement abruptly stopped. The blood contract. The life-sharing bond we had forged in the Grand Canyon. I felt a pinch. He felt a stab. But it was not just physical pain this time. As the scent of my own blood filled the cramped, dark cell, the emotional feedback loop between us violently snapped open. Damon felt my agonizing, paralyzing terror of the dark. He felt the burning pain in my shoulder, and most importantly, he realized why I was bleeding. I, his captor, the arrogant human who used him as a nightlight, was taking bullets for him. The silence in the room shattered. It did not start with a roar, but with a deep subterranean rumble that vibrated through the steel floor and rattled my teeth. My chest pocket became unbearably hot. It was like I was holding a piece of the sun. "What is that energy spike?" a panicked technician yelled over the intercom. "Director, the readings are off the charts." I rolled onto my back, gasping, as a blinding, apocalyptic crimson light erupted from my vest. The zipper melted instantly. The chubby black lizard did not just climb out. The physical form of the lizard shattered like a brittle shell of obsidian glass. The absolute darkness of the void chamber was violently obliterated. A shockwave of pure, unadulterated dark magic slammed into the walls, denting the reinforced steel and instantly vaporizing the suppression turrets. I shielded my eyes against the blinding, terrifyingly beautiful inferno of gold and crimson flames swirling in the center of the room. As the magical storm settled, the flames coiled inward, weaving together to form a solid silhouette. I blinked through the smoke, my breath catching in my throat. Standing before me was not a lizard. It was a man. He was breathtakingly tall, heavily muscled, and entirely naked, his skin glowing with shifting lava like draconic runes that pulsed with every heartbeat. A pair of magnificent, jagged obsidian horns swept back from his head, framing a face of sharp, aristocratic cruelty. His hair was long, dark as a starless night, cascading over his broad shoulders. But it was his eyes that pinned me to the floor. They were the exact same overly large golden eyes, but the confused innocence was completely gone. In its place was the terrifying ancient fury of a reigning god who had just witnessed a mortal dare to scratch what belonged to him. He did not even look at the reinforced security door. He simply raised one perfectly sculpted hand and flicked his wrist. The steel door, weighing several tons, ripped off its hinges and crumpled like tin foil, flying down the corridor along with the screaming guards stationed outside. Sirens began to blare. The entire facility was going into meltdown. Damon lowered his hand. The fiery runes on his skin dimmed slightly, casting a warm, mesmerizing amber glow across my face. The absolute terror of nyctophobia was gone, replaced by a completely different kind of awe-inspiring fear. He slowly knelt beside me. The ancient, terrifying entity reached out his massive, scorching hot hand, hovering over my bleeding shoulder. I stammered, my mind completely short-circuiting. I was lying on the floor, staring up at a naked, glowing, apocalyptic god. "You are huge. Damon's jaw tightened. He did not gloat. He did not laugh. He carefully slid one arm under my knees and the other behind my back, lifting me off the cold floor as effortlessly as if I weighed absolutely nothing. He pressed me securely against his broad, burning chest. "Shut up, Wyatt." His voice was deep, resonant, and thrumming with a dangerous, possessive vibration that sent a shiver straight down my spine. "I am getting my nightlight out of here." We did not stop moving until the sirens of the Blackwood facility were miles behind us, lost in the unforgiving expanse of the Nevada desert. Damon had carried me the entire way. He moved with a terrifying, predatory speed, leaping across ravines and scaling sheer rock faces effortlessly, all while cradling me against his chest like I was made of fragile glass. I should have felt safe. I had a literal god of destruction acting as my personal bodyguard. But as my adrenaline crashed, a cold, sobering reality settled in. This was not a chubby, helpless lizard anymore. This was a Class Omega entity, a creature capable of leveling cities. And I was the purifier who had mocked him, shoved him into tactical pouches, and referred to him as a burnt chicken nugget. He brought us to an abandoned, off-the-grid purifier safe house disguised as a dilapidated gas station near the California border. He kicked the rotting wooden door open, setting me gently onto a dusty, sagging mattress in the back room. The sun had long since set. The desert night was bleeding into the room through boarded-up windows, bringing that familiar icy grip of nyctophobia creeping back up my spine. I fumbled blindly for the kerosene lamp on the bedside table, my hand shaking violently. I struck a match, the dim, flickering orange light illuminating the small room. Damon stood in the center of the dust-moated air. He was still entirely naked, utterly unbothered by human concepts of modesty. His towering frame completely dominated the cramped space. Without the blinding fury of his transformation, I could finally take him in. The obsidian horns, the long ink-black hair, the heavy musculature, he was magnificent, but the ancient primal danger radiating from him made my survival instincts scream. He was not glowing anymore. The draconic runes beneath his skin had faded to a dull, imperceptible gray. He took a step toward the bed. I flinched instinctively, scrambling backward until my back hit the headboard. "Stay back." Damon stopped, his golden eyes luminous even in the dim lamplight locked onto mine. For a fraction of a second, something like hurt flashed across his sharp features, but it was quickly swallowed by a familiar, arrogant sneer. "Afraid, Wyatt." His voice was a rich, dark velvet that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. "Where is the brave agent who threw himself in front of anti-magic rounds for a helpless lizard?" I was protecting my tactical equipment. I lied through my teeth, my heart hammering against my ribs. He let out a low, rumbling chuckle that did absolutely nothing to calm my nerves. He stalked forward, sitting on the very edge of the mattress. The springs groaned in protest under his immense weight. "You are a terrible liar," he murmured. He leaned in entirely too close, his golden eyes sweeping over my face. "You smell like fear, but not of me. Never of me." He reached over and with two long, elegant fingers pinched the wick of the kerosene lamp. A sharp hissing sound filled the air. The flame died. The darkness crashed down, immediately heavy and suffocating. My breath caught in my throat, a sharp gasp tearing from my lips. I clawed frantically at the wall, searching for the light switch I knew would not work. The walls were shrinking. The air was turning to wet concrete. "Turn it on," I choked out a raw, humiliating plea. "Damon, please!" "Breathe, Wyatt." I felt his immense weight shift on the mattress. Suddenly, the darkness in front of me broke. It was not a fire this time. It was him. The draconic runes etched across his broad chest, his powerful shoulders, and his muscular arms ignited. They pulsed with a deep, mesmerizing, volcanic amber light, glowing like liquid magma trapped just beneath his skin. The heat rolling off him was incredible, instantly banishing the cold terror in my chest. He did not just cast light, he was the light. I sat there panting, staring at the glowing, magnificent titan in front of me. The nyctophobia receded, held at bay by the sheer imposing reality of his presence. He did not move away. Instead, he leaned back against the headboard, stretching his long legs out, crossing his arms behind his head, and looking at me with a lazy, challenging smirk. "Well," he prompted, his voice dripping with dark amusement. "Are not you going to clock in?" "Clock in?" I stammered, my brain struggling to process the situation. "I am your nightlight, am I not?" He tilted his head, his golden eyes glinting. "For 2 months, you have forcibly dragged me into your bed, pinned me against your chest, and used my body heat to soothe your pathetic human phobia." Did you think changing my form would change the terms of our arrangement? I cannot. I whispered, my face burning hotter than his glowing skin. He was a man now. A massive, intimidating, entirely naked man. The dynamic was completely destroyed. You can and you will, Damon growled softly. Before I could protest, his massive hand shot out, wrapping around my waist. He pulled me forward with terrifying ease, dragging me across the mattress until I collided with his solid, burning chest. I gasped, my hands flying up to brace against his shoulders. The heat radiating from his glowing runes was intoxicating. It was not the destructive heat of dragon fire. It was the comforting, vital warmth that had anchored me in the dark for months. He wrapped one heavy, muscular arm around my waist, pinning me securely against his side, effectively trapping me against his glowing torso. "You see, Wyatt," he murmured, his breath hot against my ear, sending a dangerous thrill down my spine. "The problem with treating an apex predator like a pet is that we develop habits." My heart was beating so fast I was sure he could feel it through my ribs. I tried to push away, but his grip was unyielding. "Let me go, Damon," I managed to say, though. My voice lacked any real conviction. He did not answer. Instead, his golden eyes darkened. The dangerous, arrogant entity suddenly shifted. The pet syndrome, the deep, ingrained instincts he had formed while trapped in that small body, flared up. Without warning, Damon ducked his head. He buried his face into the curve of my neck, his long, dark hair cascading over my shoulder. He let out a deep, resonant sigh, completely relaxing his massive frame against me. And then, incredibly, he nudged his head upward, pushing his cheek against my palm. I froze. He was waiting. He was a legendary god of destruction, a being who had just leveled a subterranean fortress with a flick of his wrist. Yet here he was in the dark of a Nevada safe house, demanding to be petted. Slowly, with trembling fingers, I lowered my hand. I brushed my thumb across the glowing lava like runes on his cheek. The skin was impossibly hot, smooth, and humming with ancient power. The moment I touched him, Damon let out a low, rumbling purr that vibrated deep within his chest, rattling through my own body. He leaned heavily into my touch, closing his golden eyes in absolute humiliating surrender to his own craving. The fear was gone. The nostophobia was dead. I lay there in the dark, trapped in the arms of a monster, gently stroking the glowing, burning skin of the apocalypse. And for the first time in my life, I did not want the sun to rise. We stayed off the grid for a week. 7 days of existing in a strange, burning limbo, where the lines between captive monster and savior blurred until they were entirely unrecognizable. But you cannot hide an apocalyptic entity from the purifiers forever, especially not when the entity in question is actively looking for a fight. Damon was not just regaining his strength, he was thriving. The runes on his body burned brighter, the air around him constantly humming with dangerous suppressed ozone. He was a god of destruction, and gods do not hide in abandoned gas stations. The attack did not come in the dead of night. It came at high noon. Director Vance did not send a strike team this time. He sent a broadcast. Every screen, every radio frequency, every encrypted purifier channel blared a single message. If Agent Wyatt did not surrender the Class Omega entity within 24 hours, the containment protocols on the Manhattan headquarters would be deliberately breached, releasing highly volatile magical toxins into the city. Vance was willing to sacrifice millions of civilians just to draw us out. "He is bluffing," I said, pacing the dusty floor of the safe house, my hands running frantically through my hair. "He has to be bluffing. The council would never sanction a mass civilian casualty event. He is not bluffing." Wyatt Damon rumbled from the corner of the room. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed over his massive chest, watching me with those intense golden eyes. He was wearing my spare tactical gear, though it barely fit his towering frame. He reeks of desperation. Desperate men do not bluff. I stopped pacing, looking at the ancient creature. "So what do we do? If we go back there, it is a suicide mission." A slow, terrifyingly beautiful smile spread across Damon's face. It was the smile of a conqueror who had just been handed the keys to the castle. "We do not just go back, my brave purifier. We tear the sky down. We hit the Manhattan headquarters at sunset." It was not an infiltration. It was an absolute massacre. Damon did not bother with stealth. The moment we stepped out of the stolen vehicle in front of the towering glass skyscraper, the suppression wards shattered like cheap glass under the sheer weight of his presence. Guards swarmed the lobby. Heavy anti-magic artillery deployed from the ceiling. I drew my dual sigil-inscribed blades, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Try not to level the entire block," I yelled over the deafening sirens. I make no promises. Damon grinned, his eyes glowing with dark amusement. He moved like a force of nature. He did not even use his fire. He simply waded through the heavily armored purifiers, tossing grown men aside like rag dolls, ripping suppression turrets from their mounts with his bare hands. He was clearing a path, an unstoppable, terrifying apex predator, completely focused on making sure I remained untouched. We fought our way up floor by floor, leaving a trail of destruction in our wake. For the first time in my life, I was not the sole weapon. I was fighting in sync with a monster, our movements complementing each other perfectly. I covered his blind spots. He vaporized anything that posed a serious threat. We breached the Director Penthouse office just as the sun completely vanished beneath the skyline. Director Vance was standing behind a reinforced glass desk, his hand hovering over a glowing red console. Behind him, the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the dark, sprawling city. Impressive, Vance sneered, though his voice trembled slightly. You brought the beast right to me. The toxins are primed, Wyatt. Surrender him, or millions die. I tightened my grip on my blade, stepping forward. You are insane, Vance. This is not about containment anymore. It has always been about control. Vance shouted, his face twisting into an ugly mask of hatred. Do you think you are special, Wyatt? Do you think your little nyctophobia was a tragic accident? I put you in that dark hole when you were a child. I crafted your fear, so you would always be dependent on the light we provided. You are nothing but a tool, a broken weapon designed to serve. The words hit me like a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs. The dark cellar, the days spent screaming until my throat bled. The absolute crushing isolation. It was not an accident. It was a calculated, horrific experiment to mold me into the perfect, obedient agent. My entire life, my trauma, my fear, it was all manufactured by the man standing in front of me. My hands began to shake violently. The blades clattered to the floor. The walls of the luxurious penthouse suddenly felt like wet concrete. The darkness outside the windows was creeping in, suffocating me. Look at you. Vance laughed coldly, stepping away from the console. You are broken. You always were. A deep subterranean growl vibrated through the room, shaking the reinforced glass. I did not even see Damon move. 1 second he was standing behind me, and the next he was directly in front of Vance. He did not use fire. He did not use magic. He reached out with one massive hand and wrapped his fingers completely around the director's throat, lifting the struggling, choking man 3 feet into the air. Damon's voice was a low, terrifying rumble that promised absolute agony. You are the reason he shakes in the dark. Vance clawed frantically at the unyielding grip, his face turning purple. Damon did not snap his neck immediately. He simply squeezed just enough to ensure Vance felt every second of his approaching demise. He turned his head slightly, his golden eyes locking onto mine. Wyatt, he said softly, ignoring the dying man in his grip. Watch. Damon raised his free hand. He did not aim at Vance. He aimed at the massive power conduit running along the ceiling, the central grid, that powered not just the purifier headquarters, but the entire city block. A sharp cracking sound broke the silence. A pulse of pure concussive dark energy shot from his palm. The conduit exploded. Instantly, every single light in the penthouse died. The massive city grid outside the windows flickered and then completely blacked out. The ambient glow of Manhattan was extinguished. We were plunged into absolute pitch-black darkness. The panic was immediate and primal. The phantom hands of the dark closed around my throat. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in ragged, hyperventilating gasps. No, not again. The cellar, the hole. Wyatt. The voice was not coming from across the room. It was right in front of me. Suddenly, the darkness shattered. The lava-like runes across Damon's broad chest and arms ignited, pulsing with a brilliant, blinding, magnificent amber light. The heat rolling off him was intense, instantly banishing the cold terror in the room. He was glowing brighter than ever before a living, breathing sun in the center of the void. He dropped Vance's lifeless body to the floor with a dull thud. He stepped forward, his massive frame completely dominating my field of vision. He did not ask for permission. He wrapped his powerful arms around me, pulling me flush against his burning, glowing chest. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, holding me so tightly my ribs ached. Look at me, he commanded softly, his voice vibrating against my collarbone. I tilted my head up, my vision blurred with tears. His golden eyes were blazing with a fierce protective intensity that stole the remaining breath from my lungs. You do not need their false light, Damon murmured, his thumb gently wiping a tear from my cheek. The skin of his hand was impossibly hot, smooth, and anchoring. "You never did. I am your darkness, Wyatt. I am the monster under the bed. And I will burn the world to ash before I let anything hurt you again." The fear was completely gone, replaced by a profound, overwhelming warmth. I reached up, wrapping my trembling hands around his massive neck, my fingers burying into his long, dark hair. I pulled him down. When our lips met, it was not hesitant. It was a collision of fire and desperation. He tasted like smoke, like ancient power, and like the undeniable, terrifying truth that I was completely, hopelessly tethered to the apocalypse. He groaned deeply, his hands dropping to grip my waist, pulling me closer until there was absolutely no space left between us. We stood in the ruins of the Purifier headquarters, surrounded by the absolute darkness of a blacked-out city, illuminated only by the glowing runes of a monster who had finally found exactly what he wanted to claim. We did not officially resign from the Purifiers. It is difficult to submit paperwork when the organization's central headquarters is currently a smoking, powerless husk, and its director is definitively dead. Instead, we simply ceased to exist. Damon did not bring about the apocalypse. As it turns out, the ancient prophecies detailing the fiery end of the world severely underestimated the lethargy of a Class Omega entity who had grown accustomed to high-end mattresses and scheduled feeding times. We relocated to a massive isolated log cabin in the snow-capped mountains of Montana. It was off the grid, miles away from the nearest town, surrounded by dense pine forests and biting cold. It was the perfect place for a dead agent and a supposed monster to disappear. To say our transition to a quiet domestic life was seamless would be a spectacular lie. Damon had retained his terrifying godlike form. He still towered over me, his broad shoulders and lava, like runes, a constant reminder of his destructive capabilities. He still possessed his legendary arrogance. But the deeply ingrained habits from our time on the road, the pet syndrome, had evolved into something far more dangerous, absolute, unrelenting possessiveness. It was a Tuesday morning, mid-December. The snow outside was piled 3 feet high against the porch. I was standing by the kitchen island, nursing a mug of black coffee, watching the fire crackle in the massive stone hearth. The cabin was quiet, too quiet. I took a sip, my eyes darting toward the hallway. "I am going outside to chop some firewood," I called out. Silence. I grabbed my heavy flannel jacket from the hook by the door and reached for the brass handle. My fingers were millimeters away from the metal when a sudden immense weight slammed into my waist, yanking me backward with the force of a freight train. I did not even have time to yell. I was pulled through the air, completely lifted off my feet, and dragged backward down the hallway into the master bedroom, and deposited unceremoniously into the center of our massive, king-sized bed. I bounced on the mattress, groaning coffee, miraculously spilling everywhere except on myself. "You are not going anywhere," a deep, rumbling voice vibrated from the pillows beside me. Damon was lying on his side, his long, dark hair spread across the white sheets like spilled ink. He was, as usual, completely unbothered by clothing. His heavy, muscular arm was the thing that had reeled me in a phantom draconic extension of his power that he used whenever he felt I was straying too far from his immediate vicinity. "Damon, the fire is going to die out," I sighed, attempting to sit up. His golden eyes, heavy with sleep and completely devoid of any remorse, narrowed. He shifted his massive frame, completely blocking my path to the edge of the bed. He reached out his scorching hot hand, wrapping around my waist, pulling me flush against his bare, broad chest. "I am the fire," he grumbled lazily, bearing his face into my neck. The lava-like runes beneath his skin pulsed with a deep, comforting amber glow, radiating an incredible heat that made the cold winter air outside completely irrelevant. "You do not need wood. You need to stay." I rolled my eyes, though a completely involuntary smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. "You are a menace. You know that, right? A legendary god of destruction reduced to a clingy space heater." He let out a low, vibrating purr against my collarbone. He did not deny it. He simply tightened his grip, his massive leg hooking over mine, effectively pinning me to the mattress. He nudged his cheek against my palm, a silent, demanding request. I surrendered. I set my empty mug on the nightstand and ran my fingers through his dark hair, scratching lightly at the base of his obsidian horns. He let out a deep sigh of utter contentment, the dangerous apex predator completely melting under the touch. "You are getting soft, dragon," I murmured. "I am securing my hoard," he countered, his voice muffled against my skin. "Dragons guard their most precious treasures." I am simply ensuring mine does not wander off to freeze in the snow. I lay there, pinned beneath the weight of an apocalyptic entity staring up at the wooden beams of the cabin ceiling. The winter sun had not fully risen yet. The bedroom was dim, cast in shadows, but the familiar, icy grip of panic, the suffocating dread of the dark that had haunted my entire life, was completely gone. It had not returned since that night in Manhattan. Vance was wrong. My fear was not a broken component of my mind. It was a deeply ingrained response to the isolation he had forced upon me, and now I was no longer isolated. I looked down at the glowing, magnificent titan sleeping against my chest. His breath was warm, his heartbeat steady and anchoring. He was arrogant, deeply territorial, and entirely unapologetic about using his ancient magic just to keep me in bed. He was the monster I was supposed to destroy, the darkness I was supposed to fear. I wrapped my arms around his broad, burning shoulders, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. The heat from his runes seeped into my bones, a permanent, eternal light that nothing could ever extinguish. "All right," I whispered into the quiet, warm room. "I will stay." Outside, the snow continued to fall across the silent Montana mountains. Inside, the world had not ended in fire and ruin. It had simply narrowed down to a single brightly lit room where a former agent of the light had finally found exactly where he belonged, right in the arms of the dark.